I remember the moment my life shifted like it had a mind of its own. The moment my wife called the lawyer and told me, with that tight, polite tone, "We're thinking about the best place for you now." Best place. As if my life was a leftover to be boxed and sent away. They thought I went broke, that I'd lost everything. Truth was, I had a plan. A ticket in my pocket, a smile waiting at the horizon. I sat in that small living room, the floral wallpaper bleaching under the afternoon sun, the sound of my own heartbeat louder than anything else. My children whispered in corners, their eyes wide like I had suddenly become a stranger. The social worker wrote notes, nodding at me like I was part of some experiment. I smiled anyway, calm, controlled, because no one knew the truth. No one knew that the real adventure hadn't started yet. I packed lightly that day, just a suitcase, some essentials, and that little envelope tucked inside my jacket. A ticket to the Caribbean, not bankruptcy, not surrender, freedom, and maybe, just maybe, a little revenge on the idea that a man my age should be locked away because life still had gas left in his tank. By the time they led me toward the van, I let them think I was defeated. I even murmured a quiet, "I guess this is for the best." A nay, but inside, my mind raced over turquoise waters, warm sand underfoot, and the sun kissing my skin in a way it hadn't in decades. They had sent me to a retirement home. I was going somewhere else entirely. The ride to the retirement home felt like a slow march to a prison. The van smelled faintly of antiseptic and vinyl, the kind of scent that sticks in your nose and makes every breath heavy. I stared out the window, pretending to watch the neighborhood blur by, but really, I was rehearsing my exit plan in my head, step by step. When we pulled up, the building looked harmless enough. A pale beige facade, neatly trimmed hedges, flowers in perfect rows. The staff greeted me with practiced cheer, pushing a wheelchair as if I needed it, though I could walk perfectly fine. I nodded and let them think I was frail, smiling weakly, sinking into the role they expected. Once inside, I caught the murmur of the other residents, some dozing, some shuffling along with walkers, others staring blankly at the television. I could feel their resignation in the air, thick and heavy, like morning fog that refuses to lift. And I thought, not me, not today. Later that evening, I excused myself to the bathroom and checked the envelope in my coat. The ticket gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light, a small piece of paper that carried the weight of an entire life waiting to be reclaimed. The plan was simple: play the part for a few days, gather some supplies, and vanish before anyone noticed I was gone. As I lay in that stiff bed that night, listening to the soft snores and whispered complaints around me, I felt a rush of exhilaration. They thought they were putting me away. They thought my story was over. But my story was just beginning. Somewhere warm, somewhere vibrant, somewhere far from the beige walls and muted voices. I drifted off to sleep, imagining the Caribbean sun, tasting the salty breeze on my tongue. Freedom, I realized, isn't given. It's taken. Morning came like a whisper, soft light spilling across the pale walls. The breakfast room was bustling, silver trays clattering, the scent of scrambled eggs and burnt toast filling the air. I moved slowly, letting the nurses fuss over me, offering gentle words I didn't need. Every smile I returned was a mask, every nod a lie. They thought I was old, tired, finished, perfect. I waited for a moment when no one was looking and slipped a small bag I had packed under my coat. Inside, a few essentials: passport, ticket, cash, a change of clothes. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious, just enough to disappear. By mid-morning, I convinced the staff I wanted a walk in the garden for my health. The grounds were beautiful. Lush green grass, colorful flowers, the distant sound of a fountain. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of their judgment slip off me, replaced by the thrill of impending escape. When the nurse wasn't looking, I slipped out the side gate, heart pounding in rhythm with my excitement. The van I had secretly arranged was parked a block away. No one saw me leave. No one noticed the envelope tucked into my hand, the golden key to the life I had been waiting for. As we drove toward the airport, I let my mind wander to the sun-soaked beaches ahead, the warm sand under my feet, the smell of salt and coconut in the air. I felt lighter than I had in years, unshackled from obligations, from judgment, from the lies that had kept me tethered. By the time I boarded the plane, I was grinning like a teenager on summer break. The retirement home existed in my past, a faded memory, while the horizon promised adventure, pleasure, and a life reclaimed on my terms. They had thought they were closing a chapter. They had no idea they were opening one for me. The moment the plane lifted off, I felt the tension in my shoulders finally melt. The city shrank beneath us, a patchwork of gray streets and neat suburbs. A world that had thought it could contain me. I pressed my hand against the window, watching the sunlight shimmer off distant buildings, feeling an electric thrill of freedom pulse through my veins. For the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's problem, anyone's responsibility, anyone's prisoner. I was just me. By the time we began our descent, the turquoise of the Caribbean waters appeared like a promise. It was surreal, almost like stepping into a painting. The sunlight danced on the waves, glittering like diamonds. I could smell it before I even landed. The tang of salt in the air, the faint aroma of tropical flowers carried by the breeze outside the airport. Every sense I had sharpened, as if my body was reminding me it was alive. I was 30 years younger in spirit than my age, and I intended to prove it. Stepping onto the tarmac, the heat hit me first. It wrapped around me like a warm blanket, heavy and indulgent, and I closed my eyes for a moment just to feel it. Then the sound of the ocean, distant but insistent, pulled me forward. I grabbed my luggage and hailed a cab, letting the driver guide me through streets lined with colorful buildings and palm trees swaying lazily in the wind. The air was thick with life, music from a nearby cafe, laughter spilling out onto the sidewalks, the occasional shout of a street vendor. Every detail was a shock after the sterile monotony of the retirement home. I arrived at the villa I had rented months ago under a different name. The place was everything I had imagined. A whitewashed building with wide windows, a terrace overlooking the ocean, a hammock strung between two palms where I could already imagine myself sinking into the sun. I stepped inside, and the faint scent of ocean spray mingled with the faint perfume of hibiscus and frangipani from the garden outside. It was intoxicating. I could feel my pulse slowing, my mind clearing. Every worry, every grudge, every thought of the life I'd left behind felt smaller already, less important. That evening, I walked along the beach, the sand cool under my feet despite the lingering heat of the day. The water lapped against the shore, a gentle rhythm that felt like it was syncing with my heartbeat. I let it wash over me, not just physically, but mentally. The sense of being watched, judged, or confined disappeared with each step. Children's laughter echoed in the distance. Couples strolled hand in hand, and vendors sold fresh fruit that glistened like jewels in the fading sunlight. I tasted the salt on my lips and realized that this, the freedom, the warmth, the raw joy of simply existing, was worth every risk I had taken. I stayed out until the stars emerged, scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Sitting on a driftwood log, I pulled the ticket from my pocket and traced the edges with my finger. It wasn't just paper. It was a declaration, a proof that I could rewrite the rules for myself, even at my age. I thought of my family back home, the retirement home, and a part of me felt the smallest flicker of guilt. But it was fleeting, replaced immediately by a surge of elation. They had sent me away because they thought I was finished, but in reality, they had done me the greatest favor without knowing it. They had freed me. I could hear the waves, smell the night air, and taste the promise of a new life on my tongue. This was only the beginning. I would explore the island, meet people who made me laugh until my ribs hurt, taste foods that burned and delighted at the same time, and rediscover pleasures I had forgotten existed. I had a lifetime of experience behind me and an entire world ahead, and for the first time in decades, I felt completely, unapologetically, alive. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the ocean calling me through the open windows. The sun had barely risen, but the sky was already ablaze with gold and pink, reflecting off the water in streaks that made the world feel magical and new. I rolled out of bed, stretching muscles that had grown stiff from years of sitting and pretending. The air was warm, carrying hints of salt, coconut, and the faint fragrance of blooming frangipani. Every breath was a reminder that I had escaped something suffocating and stepped into something alive. I dressed quickly, slipping into linen pants and a light shirt, feeling the fabric breathe with me. On the terrace, I sipped coffee I had bought the night before from a local vendor, a dark, rich brew with a hint of spice, and let the world wake up around me. Boats bobbed lazily in the harbor. Fishermen cast their nets with practiced ease, and the scent of fresh bread and grilled fish drifted from a nearby cafe. The streets were already alive with movement, children racing barefoot along the sidewalks, couples laughing in the open-air markets, vendors shouting out deals in a sing-song rhythm that made the mundane sound celebratory. I wandered into town, letting the rhythm of the island guide me. Every step felt deliberate, every glance a new discovery. The air was hot but soft, the sun brushing my skin like a tender reminder of existence. I stopped at a bakery, the sweet aroma of pastries hitting me like a shock of happiness. I bought a small pastry, warm and flaky, letting the sugar melt on my tongue as I walked. It was such a simple pleasure, but one I hadn't allowed myself in years. As I explored, I noticed how life here felt unhurried, yet vibrantly alive. People moved with a purpose, but there was no rush, no oppressive clock dictating their every step. Music drifted from open doors. Salsa, reggae, the beat of life itself. I caught snippets of conversations, laughter spilling freely. For a moment I felt invisible, and it was intoxicating. Nobody cared who I was, what I had left behind, or the mistakes I had made. Here, I was just a man, moving through a world that felt made for living, not surviving. By noon, I found a small beach bar tucked away behind palm trees, a place where the locals congregated, sipping rum and sharing stories. I ordered a drink, letting the cold sweetness slide down my throat, and listened. Stories of life, love, loss, and joy danced around me. I laughed at a joke about a fisherman's stubborn mule, feeling the kind of unguarded amusement I hadn't felt in decades. For a fleeting moment, I thought about my family, the retirement home, the life I had walked away from. And then I remembered the ticket in my pocket, the sun on my face, the taste of freedom in the air. This was real. This was my life now. The afternoon was spent wandering along secluded beaches, feeling the fine white sand slip through my fingers, letting the waves lap at my ankles. The water was warm, crystalline, and inviting. I dove in fully, the salty taste filling my mouth, the shock of the waves against my chest, making me feel alive in a way that the safe confines of my previous life never had. I floated for a long time, looking up at the sky, letting the sun burn away years of self-imposed restraint and regret. As evening approached, I found a quiet spot on a rocky outcrop, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sky turned fiery orange, purple, and pink, reflecting in the calm waters below. I felt a surge of gratitude so profound it caught me off guard. I had left everything behind: expectations, judgments, obligations, and in return, I had gained a world of sensation, freedom, and self-discovery. Here, I could reinvent myself, find joy in small things, and embrace pleasures I had denied for far too long. That night, I sat on the terrace of my villa with a glass of rum, listening to the waves crash softly against the shore. The warm breeze carried the faint laughter of neighbors, music from the town, and the promise of countless tomorrows. I realized I wasn't running away. I was running toward something, toward life lived fully, unapologetically, and on my own terms. My age, my past, the opinions of others, they didn't matter here. The only thing that mattered was the man I chose to be, and for the first time, I felt like I was finally becoming him. The following morning, I woke to the sound of distant drums echoing from the town. The rhythm was infectious, a heartbeat of life I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The sunlight poured through the open windows, warming the terrace where I had fallen asleep the night before, and the scent of salt and flowers wrapped around me like an old friend welcoming me back to myself. I stretched, feeling muscles that had stiffened from years of office chairs and cautious living loosen with anticipation. Today, I decided, I wasn't just going to explore the island. I was going to immerse myself in it, taste it, hear it, and live it fully. I dressed quickly in a light cotton shirt and shorts, slipping into worn sandals that already carried the memory of beaches past. As I stepped outside, the air hit me like a wave of freedom. The streets were alive, vendors shouting their wares, children chasing one another barefoot, and music spilling from open doorways. The smells were intoxicating. Grilled fish, roasted coffee, tropical fruit so ripe it smelled like sunshine itself. I walked with a lightness in my step, each movement deliberate, savoring the sensations I had forgotten existed. I found a small cafe perched on a hill overlooking the harbor. Wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and a friendly cat weaving between the legs of patrons gave it a charm that made my chest ache with longing for this kind of life, all those years I had spent confined to routines. I ordered a plate of fresh mango, papaya, and pineapple, along with a strong coffee, and settled into a corner where I could watch the town awaken. The fruit was sweet, almost shockingly so, each bite a burst of flavor that made me smile aloud. The coffee was bitter, rich, grounding me to the moment. I noticed the details, the way a couple laughed as they argued playfully, the old fisherman repairing his nets by hand, the sunlight catching the waves in the harbor and making the water glitter. After breakfast, I wandered toward the local market. The stalls overflowed with vibrant colors, spices in sacks, woven baskets, hand-carved figurines, fresh seafood glistening on ice. I ran my fingers over the goods, inhaled deeply, and smiled at the vendors, who nodded warmly in return. I felt like a participant in life, not an observer. A little girl offered me a mango for free, and when I laughed in gratitude, she beamed and ran off. It was moments like these, small, spontaneous, unplanned, that reminded me why I had taken this leap. By midday, I found myself on a secluded beach I had spotted from the cafe terrace. The sand was soft, almost powdery underfoot, and the water shimmered in shades of turquoise I didn't know existed. I waded in slowly, letting the waves lap at my ankles, then dove fully into the warm embrace of the ocean. The shock of cold and warmth mingled, electrifying my senses. I floated for a long time, arms spread wide, eyes closed, listening to the gentle rush of water, the cries of gulls overhead, the distant laughter of children playing on the shore. For the first time in decades, I felt completely untethered, as if I had shed years of expectation and emerged reborn. Later, I climbed a small hill behind the beach, where a grove of palm trees offered shade and a breathtaking view of the coastline. I sat down, feeling the rough bark beneath my hands, listening to the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and let my thoughts drift. Memories of the retirement home, of cold halls and whispered concerns, flashed through my mind. A part of me felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of triumph. I hadn't abandoned life. I had reclaimed it. I had chosen freedom over confinement, joy over routine, the unknown over the predictable. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I returned to the villa, tired in a way that felt satisfying, not crushing. I cooked a simple dinner, fresh fish grilled over a small flame, seasoned with local herbs, and ate on the terrace as the sky ignited with orange and pink streaks. The breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers, the distant sound of drums still faintly echoing from town. I sipped a cold drink and laughed quietly at myself, realizing that at 62, I had never felt more alive. That night, lying in bed, I traced the outline of my ticket to the Caribbean, thinking about the life I had left behind, and the one I was building here. The retirement home, the worried glances, the assumptions about my life, they all belonged to a past that no longer held power over me. Out here, I was the master of my days, the captain of my own happiness, and the architect of a life I had dared to imagine. The waves whispered outside my window. The night smelled of freedom, and I closed my eyes knowing, without a doubt, that I had finally arrived. The next morning, I woke before the sun, drawn out of bed by the rhythmic crash of the waves and the soft golden light spilling across the terrace. There was a quiet promise in the air, a feeling that the day would not be ordinary. I stepped outside barefoot, letting the warm sand coat my toes, and breathed in the scent of salt, flowers, and sun-warmed earth. I could feel my body awakening with a kind of alertness I hadn't known in decades. Every muscle, every nerve seemed alive, humming with the anticipation of a day spent fully, without restraint or expectation. After a quick breakfast of fresh tropical fruit and strong coffee, I decided to explore the island beyond the beach. I hired a small scooter from a local vendor, a bright red thing that smelled faintly of gasoline and adventure. As I revved the engine and rolled down the coastal road, the wind whipped against my face, salty and warm, carrying laughter from fishermen, the clatter of carts, and music from distant bars. Every sight, sound, and scent seemed amplified, sharp, and immediate. The blue of the ocean stretched endlessly on one side. Palm-studded hills rose on the other, and I felt a surge of exhilaration at being untethered from schedules, from judgment, from the small, constricting routines of my former life. I rode for hours, letting the road curve and twist, taking turns I wouldn't have dared in my old life, discovering hidden coves and quiet beaches, watching children dive off rocks into the crystalline water. I stopped at a small roadside cafe for lunch, a simple affair of grilled fish and plantains. But the flavors were electric, the heat of the sun on my skin, the music of a guitar player nearby, and the laughter of locals creating a symphony of vitality around me. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, letting the taste linger on my tongue. It was a lesson in pleasure, something I had forgotten, something my old life had stolen from me with its quiet, relentless march of obligations. By mid-afternoon, I found a trail leading up into the hills. The climb was steep, my lungs burning slightly, but I welcomed the effort. Each step brought a new view: terraced fields of crops, vibrant flowers clinging to cliffs, goats wandering lazily along ridges. I paused often, touching the rough bark of trees, inhaling the earthy scent of soil and leaves, listening to birds calling across the valleys. At the summit, the world unfolded beneath me, a panorama of turquoise waters, green hills, and the tiny village where I had begun my escape. I felt like an explorer discovering a world that had been waiting for me all along, and the sense of triumph, of absolute autonomy, filled my chest with warmth. I stayed at the top until the sun began its descent, painting the sky in streaks of orange, purple, and gold. Sitting on a rock, I let the breeze carry away any lingering doubts or remnants of guilt. I thought of the retirement home, of the polite smiles, the assumed weakness, and the quiet pity that had surrounded me. None of it mattered now. They had tried to cage me, to define me, to decide what I could or could not do with the remainder of my life. I had chosen differently. I had said yes to life when everyone else said I should accept my place. And for the first time in years, I felt untouchable, not in arrogance, but in pure, undeniable freedom. When I descended back to the village, the streets were alive with evening activity. Vendors sold fried plantains, grilled seafood, and fresh juice. Children chased one another along the cobblestone paths, laughing until their ribs hurt. Music spilled from bars, a mix of drums and steel guitar, and couples danced in doorways. I joined a small group of locals, clapping along to the rhythm, laughing with a spontaneity I hadn't felt in decades. One man handed me a drum, and though I hadn't played in years, I let my hands fall naturally, feeling the beat resonate through my arms and chest. The music seemed to sync with my heartbeat, a celebration of being alive, unbound, and fully present. By the time I returned to my villa, night had fallen, and the stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. I sat on the terrace with a drink in hand, listening to the waves, the distant laughter, and the low hum of life thriving around me. I realized, with a quiet, profound satisfaction, that I wasn't just existing, I was thriving. Every choice I had made, every risk I had taken, had led me here, to this perfect moment of clarity, joy, and self-possession. I was living proof that age was not a cage, that freedom could be claimed at any stage of life, and that happiness was something worth pursuing with reckless abandon. As I closed my eyes that night, the warmth of the air wrapping around me, I knew that this life, this adventure, this reclamation of self, was only the beginning. I had left behind the world that had underestimated me, underestimated my desire to live fully, and in return, I had found a life richer, wilder, and more beautiful than I had dared to imagine. For the first time in decades, I slept without regret, without fear, and without limits, dreaming not of what I had lost, but of everything that lay ahead. The next morning, I woke to the smell of salt and coffee, the horizon blushing with early sunlight. I stretched, feeling the lingering ache in my legs from yesterday's climb, a reminder that my body still had strength, that my age had not diminished my vitality, only refined it. I decided today would be dedicated to discovering the heartbeat of the island, its people, its music, and its stories. I dressed quickly in light cotton, slipped into my sandals, and stepped out into the humid, fragrant air, my senses already tingling with anticipation. Walking through the narrow streets, I felt a vibrancy I hadn't experienced in decades. Children darted past, chasing one another and laughing freely, their joy untethered by the world's expectations. Vendors called out from colorful stalls, selling fruit so ripe it seemed to explode with sweetness at every bite. I bought a mango, its juice dripping down my hand, and let the taste awaken something in me. A reminder that pleasure didn't need justification, that happiness could be immediate, raw, and completely mine. Music drifted through the streets. Drums, guitars, and voices blending in a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the island itself. I let it guide me, moving with the beat, letting my body remember the joy of spontaneous motion. By mid-morning, I found myself at a small community center where locals gathered to play music and dance. A drum circle was forming, and I hesitated at the edge, feeling the thrill of joining something so alive. One of the musicians caught my eye and motioned for me to join. I laughed, not with embarrassment but with delight, and stepped forward. My hands fell naturally on the drum, and I found a rhythm that felt innate, my body syncing with the music as if it had been waiting all my life for this moment. Around me, people danced, laughed, and sang. I felt the years of restraint, of self-imposed limitations, melting away, replaced by a sense of pure presence and unbounded joy. Later I wandered toward the harbor, drawn by the scent of the ocean and the sight of fishing boats bobbing gently in the water. Fishermen were pulling in nets, the fish glistening under the sun, their scales catching light like liquid silver. I spoke with one man who offered me a story of the sea, of storms weathered and triumphs celebrated. His voice was rich with experience, and I felt a kinship, a connection to someone who understood the rhythm of a life lived close to the natural world. I bought some fresh fish from him, chatting and laughing as we worked out a price, enjoying the easy camaraderie of strangers who were suddenly friends. By afternoon, I found a small, hidden cove where the water was impossibly clear. I waded in, letting the waves lap at my chest, feeling the salt sting my skin and fill my senses. I floated for a long time, staring up at the sky, listening to the gentle rush of water, and realized that this freedom, this life beyond expectation, was exactly what I had been searching for. No bills, no judgments, no confinement, just the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the water, and the exhilaration of reclaiming my life at an age when most people resign themselves to routine. As the sun began its descent, I returned to my villa exhausted but elated. I cooked a simple meal of fish and vegetables, the aromas mixing with the evening air, and ate on the terrace while watching the sky turn gold and purple. The warm breeze carried the faint sounds of music and laughter from the village below, a reminder that the island was alive, vibrant, and welcoming me as one of its own. I sipped a drink, feeling the rum slide smoothly down my throat, and laughed quietly at myself, realizing that I had not only escaped confinement, but had also discovered a life richer, fuller, and more exhilarating than I could have imagined. That night, lying in bed with the sound of waves crashing softly against the shore, I reflected on how far I had come. The retirement home, the whispers, the assumptions, they belonged to a life that was no longer mine. Here, I was free to create, to explore, to embrace pleasure, joy, and adventure without apology. The island had become a canvas, and I, for the first time in decades, was painting my own story. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the night, the scent of salt and flowers, and the promise of countless tomorrows lull me into a deep, untroubled sleep. The morning arrived with a softness that felt almost magical, a gentle glow spilling across the horizon as the sun lifted itself above the turquoise waters. I woke before dawn, drawn out by the sound of waves brushing against the shore and the faint calls of seabirds circling overhead. The air was warm but carried a crispness that teased my skin, mingling with the scent of salt, tropical flowers, and the faint smoke of cooking fires from the village below. I lay for a moment on the terrace, listening, breathing, letting the stillness fill me with anticipation. Today, I decided, I would dive even deeper into the rhythm of the island, into the life that pulsed here, in ways I hadn't felt in decades. After a quick breakfast of freshly baked bread, sweet tropical jam, and strong coffee, I grabbed my scooter and headed for the interior of the island. The coastal roads had been beautiful, yes, but I wanted something rawer, wilder. The air on the hills was cooler, fragrant with earth and rainwater, the landscape shifting to dense greenery dotted with flowering plants and tall, swaying palms. Birds with bright feathers darted among the trees, calling in sharp, musical tones. I drove slowly, letting the sights and sounds sink in, appreciating how even the smallest details, the curve of a leaf, the shimmer of light through the canopy, the soft rustle of wind, could awaken a man to life's richness in ways I had long forgotten. Around mid-morning, I stumbled upon a small, tucked-away village, far removed from the tourist paths. Children ran barefoot through the narrow streets, laughing and kicking up dust, while elders sat in wooden chairs, chatting, nodding at me with a warm, curious welcome. I parked the scooter and wandered in, my senses alive to every sound, every smell, every flicker of movement. The aroma of fresh bread and grilled meats mingled with flowers growing along the fences. Music drifted from an open doorway, a mix of drums, guitars, and voices in harmony. I felt a thrill I hadn't known I could feel at my age, the sheer, unadulterated joy of being present in a place so vibrant and alive. I stopped at a small workshop where a man was carving a wooden sculpture. The shavings curled at his feet, the scent of freshly cut wood filling the air. He smiled at me, nodding, and motioned for me to come closer. I watched his hands work, precise and strong, shaping the raw material into something beautiful. We spoke in broken English and gestures, and he laughed when I told him I was retired from retirement homes. There was no judgment here, only curiosity and warmth. I bought a small carving, a symbol of this day, a memento of a life reclaimed, and slipped a few extra coins into his hand as he waved me off with a grin. By early afternoon, I found a hidden waterfall, cascading into a pool so clear that I could see every stone at the bottom. I stripped down, feeling the warm sun on my skin and the cool mist of the waterfall spraying against me. I dove into the water, the shock of cold mingling with exhilaration, the roar of the falls filling my ears. I floated on my back afterward, staring up at the bright sky, listening to the soft rumble of water, and realized how long it had been since I had allowed myself to feel completely alive in a physical sense. Here, I wasn't a 62-year-old man escaping responsibility. I was a human being rediscovering his senses, his body, his joy. Afterward, I wandered through the forest trails surrounding the waterfall, feeling the rough bark of trees beneath my fingertips, inhaling the earthy perfume of damp soil and blooming flowers. I encountered a few locals returning from the fields. They waved, shared a few words, and smiled. Their lives were different, rawer, yet somehow freer than anything I had known back home. There was an honesty to their existence, a rhythm and balance I found intoxicating. For the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't trying to meet someone else's expectations, wasn't bound by the assumptions of society or family. I was simply being. As the afternoon wore on, I returned toward the coast, stopping at a cliffside overlook to watch the sun begin its descent. The sky ignited in streaks of orange, magenta, and violet, reflected in the glassy ocean below. The wind whipped against my face, carrying the scent of salt and flowers, and I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it caught me off guard. The retirement home, the whispers of concern, the polite assumptions of weakness, all of it seemed so distant now. They had thought they were confining me, but in reality, they had unleashed me. Every step I had taken, every decision to trust myself and break free, had led to this moment. By evening, I arrived back at the villa, sunburned, exhilarated, and utterly exhausted in the best possible way. I cooked a simple meal of fish and vegetables, the aromas mingling with the warm, humid air. I ate slowly on the terrace, watching the stars emerge one by one, the ocean reflecting them in scattered patterns across its surface. Music and laughter drifted faintly from the village below. I poured myself a glass of rum, feeling its warmth slide down my throat, and laughed quietly at the absurdity and brilliance of my situation. I had left everything behind, and in doing so, had gained an entire world. That night, lying in bed, I traced the edges of the Caribbean ticket in my pocket, thinking about how far I had come. The waves crashed softly outside my window, a constant grounding presence. I realized with deep satisfaction that this was not just an escape, not just a vacation from life, it was a reclamation. I had proven that age was no barrier to adventure, that freedom was always worth pursuing, and that happiness could be claimed at any moment if only a man had the courage to take it. My past life, with all its constraints, seemed like a dream now, faded, distant, and irrelevant. What lay ahead was all that mattered: sun, sea, music, and the boundless possibilities of a life fully, unapologetically lived. The morning light crept slowly over the villa, golden rays spilling across the terrace and the sparkling waters beyond. I woke to the sound of the ocean's constant rhythm and a chorus of birds calling from the palms. For the first time, I didn't feel like a man running from something. I felt like a man running toward everything: the warmth of the sun, the scent of salt and flowers, the endless possibilities of life that lay before me. I dressed quickly, slipping into a light cotton shirt and shorts, and stepped outside, letting the morning breeze wash over me. It was a different kind of freedom, the kind that isn't loud or flashy, but seeps into your bones, reminding you that you're alive. I had decided to explore the island more fully today, to venture into the small towns where tourists rarely wandered. I mounted my scooter, the engine sputtering to life with a thrill that made my chest pulse. The roads curved and climbed, revealing hidden valleys, waterfalls spilling into crystal-clear pools, and farmers tending their crops with hands hardened by years of work. Every turn brought a new sensation: the smell of sun-warmed soil, the sound of children laughing in the distance, the sight of vibrant flowers clinging to cliffs. I felt like I was discovering a secret world that had been waiting for me all along, a world untouched by the routines, judgments, and confinement of my former life. By mid-morning, I arrived at a tiny village tucked between hills. Smoke curled from chimneys, the scent of grilled fish and bread mingling in the warm air. Children ran barefoot through the streets, their laughter sharp and bright. Elders sat on benches, nodding and greeting me with warm smiles. The rhythm of life here was different, slower yet full of energy, grounded yet joyous. I wandered through the market stalls, brushing my fingers over handmade crafts, smelling spices so strong they made my head spin, tasting fruit so sweet it seemed like a revelation. A young boy offered me a small piece of sugarcane, and when I bit into it, the juice ran down my chin, sticky and sweet. I laughed, feeling a sense of delight that I hadn't felt in decades. I found a small cafe where locals gathered, the walls alive with murals of island life, the air thick with music and chatter. A guitar player strummed as a woman sang, her voice raw and full of life. I sat, letting the music wash over me, letting the conversations float around me. I spoke with a fisherman about his life at sea, about storms weathered and nets mended, and I realized how little I had truly experienced outside my own narrow world. Here, life was immediate, vibrant, and real. I bought a small carved figure from a vendor, a reminder that beauty could be found in simplicity, and that life's richness wasn't measured in money or status. In the afternoon, I found a secluded beach, a crescent of white sand bordered by cliffs and palms. The water was impossibly clear, and I dove in, letting the waves engulf me, the shock of cold mixing with the warmth of the sun on my back. I floated on my back for long stretches, staring up at the sky, feeling completely untethered from time, obligations, and expectation. The breeze carried the distant laughter of children, the faint strum of a guitar from the village, and the soft call of birds overhead. Every sensation felt heightened, sharper, and more precious. I could feel my body moving with a vitality I hadn't known in years, every muscle alive, every nerve alert. Later, I wandered along a trail that led up into the hills, where a grove of palm trees offered shade and a breathtaking view of the coastline. The air was thick with the scent of earth and flowers, and the wind whispered through the leaves. I paused often, touching rough bark, inhaling deeply, listening to the world around me. From the summit I could see the entire village, the ocean, and the small harbor where boats bobbed lazily. I felt a surge of gratitude and awe. The retirement home, the assumptions of weakness, the whispers, they all belonged to a life I had left behind. Here, I was fully alive, fully present, fully free. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange, purple, and gold, I returned to my villa. Exhausted but exhilarated, I cooked a simple meal, grilled fish, vegetables, and a cold drink, and ate slowly on the terrace, letting the colors of the sky reflect in the water below. Music and laughter drifted faintly from the village, blending with the sound of waves and the hum of the evening air. I realized, with a quiet, profound satisfaction, that this was not just an escape, it was a reclamation. I had chosen joy, adventure, and freedom over confinement, and in doing so, had discovered a life richer than I had imagined. That night, lying in bed with the ocean's song in my ears, I traced the edges of my ticket to the Caribbean. It was more than paper. It was a symbol of courage, of daring to take life back in my own hands. I thought about my family, the retirement home, the past I had left behind. None of it diminished my happiness now. What mattered was this: the warmth of the sun, the taste of freedom, the thrill of discovery, and the unshakable knowledge that life, at any age, could still be extraordinary. I closed my eyes, the waves singing me to sleep, dreaming not of the life I had left behind, but of the one I was creating, step by step, moment by moment, fully alive. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore, a rhythm so steady it felt like a heartbeat beneath the world. The sky was painted in soft pastels, the sun just beginning to rise, spilling gold and pink across the horizon. I rolled out of bed, stretching muscles that still remembered decades of restraint, and breathed deeply, savoring the scent of salt, warm earth, and blooming flowers carried on the breeze. Today, I decided, I wasn't just going to explore the island, I was going to live it, to embrace it with everything I had, body and soul alike. After a quick breakfast of fresh fruit, bread, and coffee, I mounted my scooter and headed inland. The roads were winding and steep, lined with palms and flowering bushes, the air thick with fragrance and humidity. Birds darted across the sky, their cries sharp and melodic, while small animals scurried through the underbrush. Every sense was heightened, every sight and sound and scent a reminder that life was not meant to be lived in quiet resignation. I felt younger, lighter, and more capable than I had in years. Each curve of the road brought new vistas, hidden valleys, waterfalls tumbling into crystalline pools, and villages tucked between hills that seemed suspended in time. By mid-morning, I arrived at a small village where locals were busy tending gardens and repairing nets. Children ran barefoot through the streets, laughing and shouting as if the world belonged entirely to them. I wandered among them, nodding and smiling, feeling an odd thrill at being anonymous, unseen in the way I hadn't been in my old life. I stopped at a market stall where the air was fragrant with spices and baked goods, the colors so vibrant they nearly hurt my eyes. A young boy offered me a slice of papaya, and when I accepted, the juice ran down my hand. I laughed, savoring the sweetness, the absurd joy of being alive in a place that seemed untouched by worry. I noticed a small, open-air music hall tucked between two buildings. Drums, guitars, and voices spilled into the street, and I felt a magnetic pull toward it. Inside, locals were dancing, clapping, and singing in a rhythm that made my chest ache with longing and delight. One man motioned for me to join, and though I hesitated, I laughed and stepped forward. My hands fell naturally on a drum, and immediately the beat felt like it belonged to me. My body synced with the rhythm, my mind clearing as I lost myself in the music. Around me, people smiled, encouraging me, laughing with joy. I hadn't realized how much I had missed this, the pure, unfiltered experience of movement, sound, and connection. By early afternoon, I left the village and continued toward the hills. The path was rough and uneven, but I welcomed the effort. Each step brought new scents, new textures, rough bark under my fingers, the earthy fragrance of soil warmed by the sun, the sweet aroma of flowers hidden among the trees. I climbed higher and higher, until the village and ocean stretched beneath me like a painting. I sat on a rock, the wind brushing my face, the sun warm on my back, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Every choice I had made, the escape from the retirement home, the decision to leave my old life behind, had led me here. I had traded fear for freedom, restraint for vitality, confinement for adventure. As the sun reached its zenith, I spotted a small waterfall cascading into a natural pool, secluded and shimmering in the sunlight. I stripped down and waded in, the water cold and shocking, invigorating every nerve in my body. I swam, letting the force of the waterfall pound against me, letting the cool liquid wash away years of restraint and fear. Floating on my back afterward, eyes closed, I listened to the birds, the rush of water, and the distant sounds of the village, and I realized that I had finally shed the expectations and judgments of a lifetime. Here, in this moment, I was free, completely and utterly free. Later, I wandered down a narrow trail back toward the coast, the jungle giving way to sandy beaches and rocky cliffs. I paused often, touching the rough textures of stone and bark, tasting the salty air, listening to the waves crash below. Each sensation reminded me that life was meant to be lived fully, that age was a number and not a boundary, and that freedom was something to claim, fiercely and unapologetically. I smiled at passing villagers, waved to children, and let myself feel the joy of belonging somewhere entirely new, somewhere that didn't define me by my past. By evening, I returned to the villa exhausted, sunburned, and exhilarated. I cooked a simple meal, fish grilled over an open flame, and vegetables seasoned with local herbs. Sitting on the terrace with the sky ablaze in oranges, purples, and pinks, I sipped a cold drink, listening to the waves and faint music from the village below. The world felt impossibly large, full of possibility, and I felt my chest swell with a sense of accomplishment and triumph. I wasn't running from life anymore. I was chasing it, fully and without hesitation. That night, lying in bed, the ocean whispering outside my window, I traced the edges of the Caribbean ticket in my hand. It wasn't just paper. It was proof of courage, of daring, of taking control of one's destiny. I thought of the retirement home, of the assumptions of weakness, the polite smiles and judgment I had left behind. None of it mattered anymore. I had reclaimed my life. I had claimed joy, freedom, and adventure when most would have accepted confinement. I closed my eyes, dreaming not of the past I had escaped, but of the endless possibilities that lay ahead, each wave outside my window a promise of more life, more discovery, and more unrestrained happiness. The morning arrived warm and fragrant, sunlight spilling across the villa terrace and illuminating the turquoise waters beyond. I woke with a sense of anticipation buzzing through me, a restless energy that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with life itself. I stretched slowly, feeling the lingering soreness from yesterday's climb dissolve into a quiet ache that reminded me I was alive, that my body was still capable of feats I hadn't allowed it to perform in decades. Today, I decided, I would seek out the deeper rhythms of the island, the hidden trails, the local festivals, the stories whispered in quiet corners that tourists rarely found. After breakfast, a simple affair of tropical fruit, strong coffee, and warm bread. I mounted my scooter and set off inland, letting the road guide me. The path wound steeply upward, dense jungle on either side, flowers bursting with color, birds darting through the trees in flashes of blue and gold. The air was thick, humid, carrying a bouquet of scents. earth, salt, flowers, and something indefinably wild that stirred a long-forgotten part of me. I breathed deeply, letting the smell fill my lungs, feeling alive in a way I hadn't for decades. Every turn of the road brought new vistas, hidden valleys blanketed in greenery, waterfalls spilling into pools that glinted in the sunlight, and small villages where life moved in a rhythm both unhurried and rich with purpose. By mid-morning, I arrived at a remote village perched on the hillside. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, mingling with the scent of roasted meats and fresh bread. Children ran barefoot through the streets, their laughter echoing off stone walls, while elders sat in wooden chairs, nodding in greeting as I passed. I wandered among them, letting my senses absorb the textures and colors of their lives. I touched hand-carved railings, smelled spices spilling from market stalls, tasted fruit so sweet it seemed almost impossible. A little girl handed me a piece of sugar cane, sticky and sweet, and when I bit into it, the juice ran down my hand. I laughed aloud, a pure, unself-conscious sound that seemed to surprise even me. From the village, I followed a narrow trail that led into the hills, the path shaded by thick palms and flowering shrubs. The climb was steep, my lungs working harder than they had in years, but I welcomed it. Each step was an affirmation of life, a reminder that age had not diminished me. It had only taught me patience, endurance, and appreciation. I paused often, touching rough bark, feeling the sun on my back, listening to birds and insects create a chorus that was at once chaotic and perfect. At the summit, the world unfolded beneath me, the coastline stretching endlessly, the village tucked among the hills, boats bobbing lazily in the harbor. I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Every choice, every risk, every act of defiance had led me here, to a life reclaimed, vibrant and unbound. By early afternoon, I discovered a waterfall cascading into a hidden pool, crystal clear and inviting. I stripped off my shirt and waded in, letting the cool water shock my body, every nerve awakening with exhilaration. I swam beneath the falls, letting the water pound against my chest, float on my back, and listen to the roar mingle with birdsong and the distant hum of village life. For the first time in decades, I felt completely untethered from past expectations, from the judgment of family or society. Here, in this moment, I was simply alive, body, mind, and spirit fully engaged with the world around me. Later, I wandered down a forest path toward the coast, stopping often to observe wildflowers, touch rough stones, and breathe deeply. Villagers passed by, waving, laughing, sharing stories in a language partially familiar, partially a melody I could feel even when I didn't understand. The world felt generous and alive, every interaction a reminder that connection, beauty, and joy were not possessions. They were experiences waiting to be claimed. I realized that freedom wasn't merely leaving something behind. It was moving fully into a life on your own terms, daring to feel, to act, to savor every detail. By evening, I returned to the villa, exhausted yet exhilarated. I cooked a simple meal over an open flame, fresh fish, herbs, and vegetables, and ate slowly, letting the aromas, tastes, and warmth of the setting sun anchor me in the moment. The sky glowed in fiery streaks of orange, red, and purple, mirrored in the waters below. Music from the village drifted faintly on the breeze, mingling with the sound of the waves crashing softly against the shore. I sipped a drink, feeling warmth spread through me, and laughed quietly at the sheer audacity of it all. I had left behind a life of assumptions, of confinement, of polite pity, and in doing so, I had found a world that was wild, vibrant, and unrelentingly alive. That night, lying in bed, the scent of salt and flowers carried in on the breeze, I traced the edges of my Caribbean ticket. It wasn't just paper, it was proof that life could still be seized, even after decades of compromise. I thought of the retirement home, of polite smiles and whispered concerns, and felt no regret, only satisfaction and joy. What mattered was not what I had left behind, but what I was building, a life lived fully, boldly, and unapologetically. The waves sang outside my window, a lullaby and a promise, and I closed my eyes knowing that tomorrow and every day after was mine to explore, savor, and conquer. The morning light spilled through the villa windows like liquid gold, and I woke to the familiar, comforting rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore. Today felt different, charged with a sense of possibility I hadn't fully allowed myself to feel until now. I stretched, savoring the lingering ache in my muscles from yesterday's climb and swim. Each pain, each stiffness, was a reminder that my body was alive, responsive, and capable. I dressed quickly in a lightweight shirt and shorts, slipping into my worn sandals, and stepped outside. The air was thick with salt and the subtle sweetness of blooming flowers, the scent mingling with the warmth of the morning sun. I mounted my scooter and decided to head toward a part of the island I had only glimpsed from a distance. A rugged stretch of coast where cliffs dropped sharply into the turquoise waters, and trails disappeared into dense jungle. The ride was exhilarating. The engine hummed beneath me, the wind whipped across my face, and the world seemed impossibly vibrant. Every twist and turn revealed new vistas, hidden coves, palm-studded hills, and villagers tending gardens or fishing from small boats. I waved at everyone I passed, and the smiles and greetings I received in return made me feel welcomed, part of something larger than myself, yet free from expectation or obligation. By mid-morning, I arrived at a small fishing village tucked into a cove. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, the scent of grilled fish and baked bread mingling with the sea breeze. Children ran barefoot along narrow streets, their laughter sharp and bright. I wandered through the market, brushing my fingers over handcrafted goods, inhaling the spice-heavy air, tasting pieces of ripe fruit offered by smiling vendors. A small girl handed me a sticky slice of mango, and when I bit into it, juice ran down my chin. I laughed aloud, delighting in the simple pleasures of life that had been absent for far too long. In the center of the village, drums began to beat, calling people together. A group of villagers were preparing for a small festival, a celebration of harvest and the sea. Music poured from the open square. Drums, guitars, voices in harmony, the rhythm infectious and primal. I hesitated, then joined the circle. My hands found a drum, and instinctively I fell into the rhythm, my body moving with the beat. The music coursed through me, vibrating in my chest, syncing with my heartbeat. Around me, people danced and sang, welcoming me with smiles and laughter. For the first time in decades, I felt completely integrated into a community, not as an outsider or guest, but as someone alive, fully present, and participating in the raw, unfiltered joy of life. By noon, the festival was in full swing. I ate roasted fish and plantains with locals, drinking fresh coconut water straight from the shell. The flavors were intense, vibrant, alive, so different from the sterile, predictable meals I had eaten back home. I listened to stories from fishermen about storms weathered, nets repaired, and secrets of the ocean passed down through generations. Each story made me laugh, marvel, and sometimes shiver with awe. It struck me how little I had experienced in my old life, how much I had confined myself to routines and expectations. Here, life was immediate, tangible, and richly layered. Afterward, I wandered to the edge of the cliffs, where waves crashed against jagged rocks far below. I could hear the sea screaming in its own language, smell the salt, and feel the spray on my skin. The wind tugged at my shirt and hair, carrying with it a sense of exhilaration that made my chest ache in the best possible way. I stood there for a long while, letting the raw energy of nature wash over me, feeling fully alive in a way that decades of comfort, routine, and polite surrender had never allowed. As evening approached, I returned to the villa exhausted, sun-kissed, and buzzing with exhilaration. I prepared a simple dinner, savoring the aromas as they mingled with the evening air. The sky glowed in fiery oranges and soft purples, mirrored in the ocean below. Music and laughter drifted faintly from the village, mingling with the sound of waves. I sipped a cold drink, feeling warmth spread through me, and smiled quietly at the absurdity and brilliance of my situation. I had left behind a life of confinement, expectations, and quiet despair, and in return had discovered a world full of joy, vitality, and possibility. That night, lying in bed, the gentle crash of the waves outside my window, I traced the edges of my Caribbean ticket. It was more than paper. It was proof, a symbol of courage and reclamation. I thought of the retirement home, the polite assumptions, and the whispered doubts about my future. None of it mattered. I had chosen adventure, life, and freedom over the ordinary and expected, and in doing so, had created a life richer than I had ever imagined. I closed my eyes, letting the ocean's song lull me to sleep, dreaming not of the life I had left behind, but of the infinite possibilities that awaited me on this island and beyond. The morning arrived in waves of golden light spilling across the terrace, the Caribbean sun warming my skin like an old friend. I woke early, feeling the thrill of anticipation I hadn't realized could still surge through me. Today, I decided, I would explore not just the physical island, but its people, their stories, their rhythms, their laughter, their struggles. The scooter waited outside, and as I mounted it, the wind hit my face, carrying the sense of salt, flowers, and warm earth. My heart raced with possibility, and for the first time in decades, I felt entirely unbound. The roads twisted and climbed through lush hills, each turn revealing hidden waterfalls, sparkling rivers, and villages tucked into green valleys. Birds darted across the sky in flashes of blue and gold, their calls ringing sharp and bright. I inhaled deeply, savoring the fragrance of wet earth and blooms, feeling each sensation ripple through me like electricity. Every sight, sound, and smell reminded me that life was meant to be lived fully, with curiosity, courage, and delight. I passed farmers tending crops, children racing barefoot, and elders who smiled knowingly at my grin, as if they recognized that I had finally claimed something precious, my freedom. By mid-morning, I arrived at a small coastal village where the scent of grilled fish and fresh bread filled the narrow streets. Children ran laughing through the alleys, their bare feet kicking up dust. I wandered through the market, brushing my fingers over colorful woven fabrics, inhaling spices that made my head swim with warmth, and tasting fruit so sweet, it made me laugh aloud. A girl handed me a piece of mango, sticky juice dripping down my hand, and when I bit into it, the sweetness seemed to unlock a joy I hadn't felt in years. The market bustled with life, and I felt a deep connection, not as an outsider, but as someone fully present, fully awake to the rhythm of the world. In the center of the village, preparations for a festival were underway. Drums pounded in the square, guitars strummed, and voices rose in harmony. Villagers danced, laughed, and called out to one another, and I found myself drawn into the circle. My hands fell naturally on a drum, and immediately the rhythm felt innate. My body moved to it, my chest sinking with the beat, and around me, people smiled, clapped, and sang. For the first time in decades, I felt a sense of belonging, of participation in something larger than myself, something raw and joyful and unpolished. I laughed, truly laughed, feeling the sound vibrate through my chest. By afternoon, I followed a narrow trail inland, where the jungle pressed in on either side, and sunlight dappled the path in shifting patterns. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil, wild flowers, and the occasional burst of fruit. I paused often, touching rough bark, listening to the calls of birds and insects, and feeling the earth beneath my feet. The climb led to a hidden waterfall, cascading into a crystal-clear pool. I stripped down and waded in, the cool water shocking my body, electrifying every nerve. I swam beneath the falls, letting the water pound against me, floated on my back, and let the sheer force of nature wash away any remnants of doubt, fear, or guilt. Later, I wandered along a cliffside path overlooking the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks far below, sending up a spray that smelled of salt and freedom. I felt the wind tug at my clothes, tousle my hair, and carry with it a sense of exhilaration that made my chest ache with delight. Standing there, looking out over endless water and sky, I realized how far I had come. The retirement home, the whispered judgments, the assumptions of weakness, all belonged to a life I had left behind. Here, I had reclaimed myself, my agency, my right to joy. By evening, I returned to the villa, sunburned, exhilarated, and profoundly content. I prepared a simple meal, fish grilled over an open flame with local herbs, and sat on the terrace as the sky exploded in shades of orange, red, and violet. Music and laughter drifted faintly from the village below, blending with the sound of waves. I sipped a cold drink and felt warmth spread through me, a satisfaction that was quiet yet deep, an affirmation that I had chosen wisely, daringly, and well. I had left behind expectations and confinement, and in return found freedom, joy, and a life richer than I had imagined. That night, lying in bed with the sound of waves and the faint perfume of flowers drifting through the open windows, I traced the edges of my Caribbean ticket. It wasn't just paper. It was proof that life could still be claimed, that adventure, joy, and freedom were never limited by age. I thought of my family, the retirement home, and the quiet assumptions of those who underestimated me. None of it mattered. What mattered was this: sun, sea, laughter, music, and the unshakable knowledge that life, even at 62, could still be extraordinary. I closed my eyes, letting the waves lull me to sleep, dreaming of tomorrow and the limitless possibilities it would bring. The dawn came quietly, spilling soft gold across the villa terrace and the endless turquoise waters beyond. I woke before the sun fully rose, the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore already pulling me awake. There was a thrill in the air, a sense of possibility that felt almost electric. I stretched, feeling the lingering ache from yesterday's climb dissolve into a satisfying tension that reminded me I was alive, my body still capable of feats I had long neglected. Today, I decided I would push myself further, not just to explore the island, but to truly immerse in its life, to connect with its people, and to experience moments I had denied myself for decades. After a light breakfast of fresh fruit and strong coffee, I mounted my scooter and headed inland. The road twisted sharply through dense jungle and over rolling hills, the air thick with the scent of earth, flowers, and sea spray drifting in from the coast. Birds called to one another from the treetops, their colors flashing bright against the greenery. Every curve revealed hidden waterfalls, cliffside vistas, and villages tucked into the folds of hills, each one more enchanting than the last. The engine's hum and the wind in my face made me feel almost giddy, like a boy discovering the world for the first time, yet tempered by decades of experience. By mid-morning, I reached a small coastal village preparing for a local celebration. Smoke curled from the chimneys of humble homes, mingling with the smell of roasting fish and sweet pastries. Children ran barefoot through the alleys, their laughter bright and irrepressible, while elders sat on benches, observing the world with quiet amusement. I wandered through the market, taking in the colors of woven fabrics, the scents of spices, the tang of citrus, and tropical fruit. A young girl offered me a piece of papaya. I accepted gratefully, letting the juice drip down my fingers as I laughed aloud at the sheer joy of simple pleasures. Music soon began to rise from the village square. Drums and guitars called people to gather, their rhythms infectious and alive. Villagers danced, clapping and singing with a vitality that seemed almost primal. Without hesitation, I joined them. My hands fell naturally on a drum, and instantly the rhythm became mine. My body moved in harmony with the music, my chest sinking with each beat. Around me, the villagers smiled, laughed, and encouraged me. In that moment, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't known in decades. Here, I wasn't an outsider. I was participating in life at its fullest, sharing joy that required no explanation, no justification. By early afternoon, I decided to explore the cliffs that jutted into the ocean beyond the village. The hike was strenuous, my muscles screaming in protest at first, but each step was a testament to my vitality. I paused often, touching rough bark, inhaling the earthy fragrance of soil and flowers, and listening to the cries of birds overhead. At the summit, I looked out over the ocean, the village, and the hidden coves below. The wind tugged at my clothes, tousled my hair, and carried with it the exhilarating scent of salt and freedom. I felt a deep, almost overwhelming sense of gratitude. Every risk, every choice, every act of defiance had led me to this moment. I was 62, and yet I had never felt so alive. I descended toward a hidden waterfall tucked into a valley below the cliffs. The pool glimmered like glass, and I didn't hesitate. I stripped down and let the water shock my body, the coolness invigorating every nerve. I swam beneath the falls, letting the water pound against me, floated on my back, and stared up at the sky, feeling completely untethered from expectations, from judgment, from past limitations. I could hear the village distant but alive, see the sunlight glinting on the waves, taste salt on my lips, feel my own heartbeat loud and certain. I realized that freedom was not just escaping, it was embracing fully, with courage and abandon, everything life had to offer. By evening, I returned to the villa, sun-kissed, exhausted, and vibrating with exhilaration. I prepared a simple meal over an open flame, fresh fish, vegetables, herbs, and ate slowly on the terrace, letting the warm breeze carry the faint sounds of music and laughter from the village below. The sky burned in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and violet, mirrored in the ocean waves. I sipped a cold drink, savoring the taste, the warmth, the sheer satisfaction of being alive and in control of my life. The retirement home, the judgments, the whispers, all of it felt distant, irrelevant, and almost absurd. I had traded confinement for adventure, expectation for freedom, and in return, I had discovered a life richer, fuller, and more intoxicating than I could have imagined. That night, lying in bed, the scent of salt and flowers drifting through the open windows, I traced the edges of my Caribbean ticket. It wasn't merely paper. It was proof, a symbol of daring, courage, and reclamation. I thought of the life I had left behind and smiled, knowing that nothing in the past could diminish the joy I had discovered. Waves whispered outside my window and I closed my eyes, content, certain that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new connections, and new ways to embrace the boundless gift of being fully alive. The morning sun spilled across the villa terrace in a warm golden wash, the ocean shimmering like molten glass beyond. I woke with a sense of quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from years of struggle, risk, and ultimately, triumph. My body ached pleasantly from the climbs, swims, and hikes I had pushed myself through over the past weeks, a reminder that life, at 62, could still challenge, exhilarate, and reward. I stretched slowly, savoring the scent of salt and flowers in the breeze, letting my lungs fill with warm, fragrant air. Today, I felt complete, alive in a way I hadn't known for decades. After breakfast, I wandered down to the beach, my feet sinking into the soft white sand. The waves lapped at my ankles, cool and insistent, carrying the briny scent of the ocean. Children laughed in the distance, their joy bright and unrestrained. Music from the village drifted faintly on the breeze. I breathed deeply, savoring every sound, smell, and sensation. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from obligations, judgments, or the polite pity of others. I was fully, unapologetically present. A man who had reclaimed his life and discovered that happiness wasn't given, it was taken. I spent the morning exploring the cliffs beyond the beach, marveling at the way the sunlight hit the rocks, how waves exploded in foamy bursts below. I paused often, running my fingers over rough stone, listening to the wind, tasting the salt on my lips. Every step felt deliberate, a conscious embrace of freedom. Along the trail, I encountered a group of locals gathering herbs and plants. They welcomed me with smiles and laughter, sharing stories of the land and sea, teaching me names of plants I had never known. I felt a deep connection, not just to them but to the world around me, to the earth beneath my feet, the sky above, the ocean endlessly stretching toward the horizon. By mid-afternoon, I returned to the village for the festival that had become a daily rhythm of life here. Drums, guitars, and voices swelled in the square, drawing everyone together. I joined in without hesitation, my hands finding a drum, my body moving to the rhythm, my laughter mixing with theirs. I watched children dance, elders nodding to the beat, and felt a profound sense of belonging. I had left behind a life that underestimated me, assumed I was fragile, constrained by the quiet pity of family and society. Here, no one judged me. No one confined me. No one dictated my happiness. I was free, And more importantly, I had learned to claim that freedom for myself. As evening fell, I wandered back to the villa, sun-drenched and exhausted, carrying a small woven basket of fruit from the village market. I prepared a simple dinner on the terrace, the aromas mingling with the warm, fragrant air. The sky blazed with color, fiery oranges and reds fading into soft purples. I sipped a cold drink, letting the warmth settle into my chest, and reflected on the weeks I had spent here. The retirement home, the whispered assumptions, the polite smiles of pity. It all felt like a distant, irrelevant memory. I had walked away from confinement, and in doing so, I had discovered a life richer, fuller, and infinitely more rewarding than I had dared to imagine. Later, I sat on the terrace, watching the stars emerge one by one over the ocean. I thought of the ticket that had brought me here, once a small slip of paper now transformed into proof that life could be claimed, even at an age when most people resign themselves to routine. I felt gratitude so deep it caught in my throat, for the courage I had found, for the freedom I had seized, for the joy, laughter, and adventure that had become my daily companions. The waves whispered below, a constant reminder of the world's rhythm, its persistence, its infinite capacity to offer wonder to those willing to embrace it. As night deepened, I lay in bed, the gentle crash of the waves outside my window, the soft scent of flowers in the air. I traced the edges of the Caribbean ticket once more, smiling. I had left behind a life that underestimated me, and in return, I had found a life that celebrated me, my choices, my curiosity, my courage. I was free, alive, and unafraid. Sleep came easily, filled with dreams of endless sun, shimmering water, music, laughter, and the quiet triumph of a life fully reclaimed. For the first time, I felt a peace that was absolute, knowing that I had finally arrived. Not at a place, but at a way of being, unbound, joyful, and entirely my own.